are the leaders of the webinar. For tonight's session, I will be the host, so you will see me as well as our Chancellor, John Vanderwert. On the day of convention, you will see the Bishop, of course, the Chancellor, the Secretary of Convention, and probably a few other people. Now, earlier today, you received an email from my colleague, Kim Vaughn, and that email contained two links. One link was for this webinar, which you clearly received because you are with us right now. And the other link was for Vpol, which will be our voting system for elections. Without closing out this webinar, and that's important, please don't close this webinar window. We want you to access your email in your web browser. If you prefer, you could access your email on a separate device like your phone or tablet. We want you to find that email Kim sent and keep it handy because you will need it later on this evening. If you have trouble finding the email, its subject line was Jan 21 practice convention links. And if you don't see the email in your inbox, you might want to check your spam folder. While you are searching for that email, I am going to pause for just a moment and offer a prayer on our behalf. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, as we prepare for our diocesan convention, be present with those who take counsel for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. So we are going to start now by talking about how to be recognized in order to speak at convention. In a Zoom webinar, you will not have the ability to mute and unmute yourself as you would during a Zoom meeting. Instead, all participants are muted, and you must be recognized in order to speak. The official way to be recognized to speak at convention is by using the raised hand button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you would like to speak, similar to standing up to the microphone during an in-person convention, please click the raised hand button at the bottom of your screen, and you will eventually be recognized to speak by the bishop. Once you are recognized, you will be invited to unmute yourself so that you can be heard by all other participants. It's important to know that Zoom keeps track of the order in which people raise their hands. So please don't worry about losing your place in line. You will be called upon when it's your turn. Also, once you have clicked the raised hand button to express your desire to speak, please do not click it again. One of our hosts will lower your hand for you once you have had your chance to speak. So we want to practice raising our hands and recognizing a few people to speak right now. Please look at the bottom of your screen for the raised hand button. If you don't see it there, you should find it as you click on your name as an attendee. Please find the raised hand button and click on it. We want everybody to raise their hands at this moment. Great. Looks like almost everyone has raised their hands. Super. Great. We have 89 attendees tonight. Now 90 attendees. Okay, and almost everyone's raised their hand. That's great. That's great. It looks like Adrienne Clamp raised her hand first. So I am going to recognize her to speak. Adrienne, our staff will invite you to unmute yourself. So you should see a prompt on your screen. If you would click on that to unmute yourself, and then please just say hello to everyone.
Hello, Diocese of Washington.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Kylene Turner-Wiley, it looks like you were second in line. So I am going to recognize you, and you will see a prompt to unmute yourself. If you would click that and then say hello.
Hello, how are you?
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So now we will lower everyone's hands, and our staff will take care of that. Perfect. Before I take any questions on being recognized to speak, I want to first talk through the Q&A and chat buttons at the bottom of your screen. At convention, the Q&A button will only be used for official convention business. If you have a question for a member of diocesan staff, or when the time comes, if you want to submit a nomination from the floor or an amendment to a resolution, you will use the Q&A button. The chat button, on the other hand, will be used for all non-business related conversations. If you would like to offer a prayer, give a shout out to a colleague or friend, or comment on the proceedings, please use the chat function. To chat with everyone, you go to the chat box and select all panelists and attendees to ensure your message reaches everyone. Note that you cannot chat privately with other attendees, as we often do during Zoom meetings. Right now, I would ask all of you to use that chat button to share one word on how you're feeling today. Whether you are anxious or stressed, hopeful or grateful, please type one word into the chat to describe how you're feeling. Okay, look at those answers pouring in. Super, thank you everyone. We should all be able to see the responses. Thank you. As we continue on, please feel free to use the chat. Tell us what parish you're from, whether you are a clergy or lay delegate, whether this is your first convention or your 10th convention. The chat is open for you to use tonight, and as you will see, one of our diocesan staff members, Archdeacon Sue, will be engaging with you in the chat. Now, let's turn to the Q&A button. As I mentioned a few moments ago, on the day of convention, the Q&A button will be used only for convention business. Tonight, though, we are going to use the Q&A to see if you have any questions about the topics we've covered so far. And then we will demonstrate how to submit an amendment to a resolution. So if you have a question about anything we've talked about, raising your hand in order to be recognized to speak, about using the chat, or even about this Q&A button, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. A little window will pop up. You write in your question and press enter. Your question will not be visible to everyone, but only to those of us leading the webinar. I will take the questions as they come in, read them out loud, and we will try to answer them for you. I see a few questions already coming in the chat. Great. The first question comes from Christ Church Durham Parish. Is it necessary to use Webmail to access Vpol email? Or is it okay to use mail client like Apple Mail? That's a great question. I am going to defer that to Peter Turner, our IT director, who is with us. Peter, do you have an answer for that?
Yes, you can use whichever mail program you use. The Vpol credentials will be accessible from any mail client. So it doesn't matter, whatever you're most familiar with using.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for these comments, Sarah and Anne. We have a question from Caitlin Frazier. Will the video feed for participants ever be visible? The two people who spoke so far were voice only, not video. So I do know that you will not be able to see other participants, only those who are leading the webinar. It sounds to me like you can hear my voice, but that you cannot see me. Peter, any thoughts on that? Why someone might be able to hear me but not see me?
So I think they were referring to the people who, the attendees who spoke, to Adrian so the attendees who will be called on to speak or recognized to speak, you'll be able to hear their voices but not speak them. That's as this is a webinar format to manage the number of participants.
Thank you so much, Peter. That's right. On the day of convention, you will be able to see the people that are usually sitting at the head table when we're in the cathedral. So the bishop, the chancellor, and the secretary of convention. But when other members of convention get up to speak, think about people standing up to the microphone at convention. You will not be able to see them on the webinar. I think that should also answer the question from Robert at St. Columba's, who asked, are all of us visible to anyone? No, you are not. As the leader of this, I can only see myself and the chancellor, as well as some of our diocesan staff who are working behind the scenes. Another question has come in, is there a thumbs up or other reaction button? That's a great question. Of course, we all are familiar with the reaction buttons on Zoom meetings. Peter, does a Zoom webinar have reaction buttons?
We're not using the reactions button for this because we don't want to get people confused between the raise hand and the hands up in the reactions.
Thank you. There's a question coming in about who will lead the opening worship, and that will be the bishop on the Saturday morning of convention. A couple of people have not received the Vpol link, or one person has not received the Vpol link, and it should be, your Vpol link should be in the same email that you received earlier today that had the link for this webinar. Today's email should have had two links, the link for this webinar and the link for Vpol. And there is a question, can we use Vpol on our phones instead of our computer browser? Yes, you may use your phone to access Vpol. Why are other people's questions not showing up? I believe it is only the leaders of the webinar who can see the Q&A, which is why I'm reading the questions out loud. Peter, is that correct? Only the webinar leaders can see the Q&A.
That's correct, Andrew. Yes, unless there's a particular response to the question, only the panelists and co-hosts will see those questions.
Thank you. And then James Isaacs asks the very important question, will parking be free for the convention this year? And the answer is yes, unless you will charge yourself for parking in your own driveway. And finally, the last question I see, at least at this moment, is from Pamela. Should we be logged into Vpol now? I would say yes, if you're able to log in now, that would be great. But at least please have that email with the Vpol link handy because when we practice voting using Vpol in a little while, we want you to be able to log in then. So you can log in now, but at least have that email with the link handy. There's a question from Charles. Will only verbal answers be given or will written answers be given as well? I think for tonight, it will only be verbal answers. On the day of convention, that's a great question. I think when a written response is required, we would provide a written response. There's a question from Ophelia. She asks, I received 2 links. Is that okay? Yes, you need to have 2 links. The first link being for this webinar. The second link is for the Vpol system. And I think Ophelia is has a follow-up 2 for Vpol. I'm not sure exactly what you mean there, Ophelia, but you should have 1 link that you clicked on to participate in this webinar and 1 link to click on to access Vpol. Both of those links were in the 1 email that went out earlier today. Pamela says, I am not sure how to sign up to vote. Would you please explain that again? Absolutely, Pamela, and we will walk through that later. Everyone should have received an email earlier today from my colleague, Kim Vaughn. The subject line in that email was Jan 21 practice convention links. In that email, there were 2 links. One for tonight's webinar, which you all must have clicked on because you are with us right now. And the second was for Vpol. That's the system we will use for elections. You don't need to click on that Vpol link right now, but please keep it handy for when we practice voting in a little while. So there's a question about on the day of convention, will we receive the link for Vpol again? All of those who are registered for convention will receive 2 links next week ahead of convention. The 2 links will be the same as, will be similar to tonight. They will be different links, but for the same purpose. 1, to join the convention webinar on Saturday, and a second for Vpol. Sherry's asking, where do we put the Vpol link? You will want to click on that in just a little while, Sherry. Ophelia says, I received 2 emails. If they were the identical emails, Ophelia, you should be able to use the links in either one. And then Pamela says she only sees 1 link in my email. Again, Pamela, I would check that it was the email from earlier today with the subject line Jan 21 practice convention links. And that email should have 2 links in it. That's all the questions I see at this moment. And so we are going to continue on. There will be further opportunities to ask questions. And of course, if there's anything confusing after tonight's session, we have over a week before the day of convention, and there will be opportunities for all of you to reach out to diocesan staff with further questions. So now, having used the Q&A to ask questions, we will talk through how to submit an amendment, how to submit an amendment to a resolution. Submitting amendments to resolutions will be done through the Q&A. Tonight, we will have a practice resolution on denying cats communion. And in a moment, we will put the resolution up on the screen. If you would like to propose an amendment to that resolution, please click on the Q&A button, type in your amendment. We ask that you be very specific in your amendment submission. For example, if you would like to change the wording in line 6 of the resolution, you would type in the Q&A box something like, original, line 6, but that cats not be allowed communion. Change to, but that cats be allowed communion. That way, as we read your submission, we know the exact line and the exact word or words you want to amend. On the other hand, if you would like to insert a line into the original resolution, you could write something like, add after line 6, except on high holy days. And that way we know exactly what words you want added and where you want them added. Once you submit your amendment through the Q&A, please click on the raised hand button in order to be recognized. And you will eventually be recognized to speak to your amendment submission. Okay, so now we are going to show our practice resolution on the screen. The resolution is on denying cats communion. Resolved, the Convention of the Diocese of Washington submits to the 80th General Convention of the Episcopal Church the following resolution. Resolved, that the House of concurring the 80th Convention permits dogs and cats to attend all worship services, but that cats not be allowed communion. Once you have an opportunity to read that resolution, we would like someone to submit an amendment. So please think of an amendment you would like to submit and use the Q&A button, following the specific format we discussed. Okay. Thank you. A few amendments have come in. We're going to take just as convention, we will take the amendments in order. And the amendment we have is from Milana, and it is line 6. She would like to amend it to say cats should only be permitted to receive after they are baptized. So permits dogs and cats to attend all worship services, but cats should only be permitted to receive communion after they are baptized. As you can see on your screen right now, my colleague Kim is updating the resolution with the proposed amendment. Thank you, Kim. I think you would just need to delete a few words so that it says, but that cats should only be permitted, et cetera, et cetera. That's better. I think we still need to remove one of the cats words. There we go. So there is the amended resolution. The House concurring that the 80th General Convention permits dogs and cats to attend all worship services, but that cats should only be permitted to receive communion after they are baptized. So that was the submission from Milana. And at this point, I am going to recognize Milana to speak. Milana, you should see a pop-up window inviting you to unmute yourself. And I would ask that you do unmute yourself and just say one sentence on why you submitted that amendment.
To make people laugh.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. At convention, after an amendment has been submitted, we would spend time discussing the proposed amendment, and then eventually we would vote on the amendment. We are not going to debate this proposed amendment tonight, but we are going to vote on it in just a minute. To do that, though, we first need to talk about voting. So let me explain that, and then we will take some questions again. There will be two ways for us to vote at convention. The first is using Zoom poll. Most of our voting at convention will be done in this way. Zoom poll replaces the voting by raising our hands that we normally do at an in-person convention. And right now we will use Zoom poll to vote on the amendment that was submitted by Milana. In just a second, you will see a Zoom poll pop up on your webinar screen. When that happens, you will select your answer and then click submit. Be careful that you don't close the pop-up window until after you've voted. Select your answer first, press submit, and then the pop-up window will go away. So in just a moment, there is the Zoom poll. So please vote yes if you support the amendment that was submitted. Please vote no if you are against the amendment. You will have about 30 seconds to vote, and then once we close the voting, we should have the results very quickly. I should note that if the pop-up window covered the resolution with the amendment, you can move the pop-up window to the side so that you're able to see the resolution with the amendment in it. Again, vote yes if you support the amendment that's highlighted in yellow. Vote no if you are against the amendment. Okay, so we've closed the voting, and in just a moment, we should see a screen that has the results. There they are. 65% voted yes in favor of the amendment. 35% voted no against the amendment. The amendment passes. And I can type that into the Q&A. And hopefully that shows up on everybody's screen where I just typed in amendment passes. So now, having done that, we are going to pause to see if there are any questions on submitting amendments to resolutions or on Zoom polling. So I see in my Q&A that some others proposed amendments. So let me thank you all so much. This is great. Look at all of these amendments. Let me dismiss some of those from my screen. And at this point, if you have questions about submitting resolutions or submitting amendments to resolutions, submitting amendments to resolutions, or questions about using Zoom poll, please type those questions into the Q&A. So the first question comes in from Beth Callahan. Do you need a second for amendments? That's a great question. Yes. On the day of convention, we would need a second for an amendment, but we did not do that tonight simply to save time. But on the day of convention, amendments do need a second. Pamela's question is, how would one abstain from voting? My guess is that by not voting at all, but let me defer that to Peter. Peter, how would one abstain from a vote such as the one we just took?
Thanks, Andrew. In order to get the results from a simple yes/no ballot, as we would take at the live convention, we've restricted the answers to yes and no. So if you don't wish to vote at all on the amendment or the resolution, you don't have to vote and you can just pass on it.
Thank you. Someone is pointing out that the amendment results didn't show up. So I apologize for that. I tried to type in the message amendment passes, and I thought I did that correctly in order for all of you to see it. But apparently it didn't work. So I apologize for that. Some people, it seems like I see in the chat, some people did see it. It showed up in the Q&A and not in the chat. So Susan, you might check the Q&A to see if my message amendment passed is there. But certainly we will have that worked out before the day of convention. Margaret is asking, how do I, and a couple of people are asking, how do I second the motion for a proposed resolution? This question was asked by a few people. And again, if you, on the day of convention, to make a second, you would ask to be recognized, which you would do by using the raised hand function. And once you are recognized to speak, you could then second the proposed amendment. I'm just going to call on our Chancellor, John Vanderweer, to make sure I said that correctly.
That's correct, Andrew. Once someone submits a proposed amendment through the Q&A feature, we'll recognize that person first to move the amendment, and then we'll ask if there's a second, and people can raise their hand, and the first person whose hand is raised will be called upon to make the second to that amendment, and then we'll proceed to the discussion of the amendment.
Thank you, John. Are there other questions about submitting amendments or Zoom polling? Please type your questions into the Q&A. I am going to give everyone another minute or two to do that before we move on. Seeing no other questions, I'd like to talk about the second way we will vote at convention, which is using the system called Vpol. Vpol is what we will use for elections when our canons require that we vote by orders. Right now, we are sharing a slide with directions for accessing and logging into Vpol. As I mentioned, when we first started tonight, earlier today, you should have received an email from us. And that email had two links, one for this webinar and the other for Vpol. We want you to find that email right now. Hopefully you have it handy. Remember, do not close out this webinar, but find that email. If you want, you can access your email on a separate device like your phone or tablet. Please find the email that we sent you with the Vpol link and click on it. Then enter the unique access code by typing in all capital letters EDOWPC. From there, you follow the prompts to fill in your ID number, which was included in the email we sent you, then your last name. Select the polling session, Convention Practice Session. Click Submit and you will be logged in. At first, you will see a page that says something like, the question will be broadcast shortly. That's because the poll is not yet open for voting. When we are ready to vote, we will have more instructions. Right now, though, I want to give you a few moments to log into Vpol. If you have any questions about logging in, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Once you are logged in, we would ask that you come back to the webinar and click on the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen to indicate that you're logged in and ready to vote. Wonderful. I see lots of people are having success logging in, but we are going to give it more time for others. Let me check the Q&A here for a chat. Allison wants to know, will these be the same credentials we will use for convention? Let me call on my colleague, Kim Vaughn, to answer that. Kim?
No, the credentials that you received today are just for the practice session. I'll be sending out new credentials for the official convention.
Thank you. So it looks like a little over half, maybe close to 2/3 of the folks are logged into Vpol and ready to vote. I'd like to give us a little bit more time. Hopefully we can get others logged in and ready as well. If you're having any issues, please use the Q&A and let us know, and perhaps we can help. Again, if you're logged into Vpol and ready to vote, please use the raised hand button at the bottom of your webinar screen so that we know that you're ready. And I see that someone signed up too late to get Vpol credentials for tonight, so don't wait for me. Thank you so much. That's a good point. I do know that some people joined late and so won't have the Vpol credentials. Great, and we're getting closer now. This is wonderful. Good. Okay, so at this point, I think we are ready to vote. And so we will open the ballot. In your web browser, in the Vpol tab, you should see the ballot appear on your screen. If you don't see it there, please click the refresh button at the top of your browser, and you should then see the ballot. We are voting on the question, what is your favorite pet? And you can vote for 2 out of the 5 candidates. Please don't vote for more than 2. We will leave the ballot open for a minute or 2. And while the ballot is open, I see some questions coming in. I don't have, so a couple of people don't seem to have the second link to Vpol. So first of all, hopefully you are opening the email that was sent to you by Kim Vaughn earlier today. That email should have had 2 links in it. If it didn't, I apologize for that. Unfortunately, you won't be able to vote then in this session. We will want to make sure that you have your second link next week before convention. So we'll give you just a little bit more time to vote. The question is coming in, at convention, will we be giving folks 5 minutes to vote? Yes, I think the window for voting will be about 5 minutes. We want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to vote at convention. At this time, we are going to close the ballot. The results will take us just a few minutes to process, and then we will share them on the screen. After we see the results, we will again open it up for questions regarding Vpol. So there's one point here, one suggestion that we might want to post a screenshot of the email with both links so you can point out the Zoom link and the Vpol link. I'm going to ask some of my colleagues who are working behind the scenes, would that be possible to share a copy of the email that went out earlier today so we can show folks where the two links were in the email?
I can show it in a second, but I'm tabulating the results.
Okay, so let's tabulate the results first, because of course we're all anxious to see which pets come out on, which animals come out on top. And then we will share that email that shows the two links. The other question that's come in is, can alternates vote at the real convention? Our alternate is taking part in the practice tonight. Alternates only vote at convention if they are taking the place of a delegate. If you have an alternate that will be taking the place of a delegate, we ask that you complete the seating of an alternate form, which can be found on the convention page of the EDOW Diocesan website. If alternates are not taking the place of a delegate, then alternates are not eligible to vote at convention. Again, we're just waiting for the results of our vote to come in. And as soon as we have those, we will post them for you. Here we go. So our election for choosing our favorite pets, as you can see, we voted by clergy and lay order, just as we would at convention. Clergy, number of votes cast 16, number of votes to be elected 9. Lay, number of votes cast 57, number of votes to be elected 29. Then you can all see that a dog received 13 clergy votes, 48 lay votes, a total of 61 votes, and the dog was elected. Cat received 13 clergy votes, 40 lay votes, a total of 51. So cats were also elected. So dogs and cats have been voted as our favorite pets, poor fish and birds and reptiles. Thank you, Kim, for sharing those results. I'm going to ask Kim to take a moment to see if she can share the email that went out today. So here's the email that went out earlier today. Again, it was from Kim. You can see that there is a linked Practice Convention Zoom webinar link. And then right below that is the Vpol link. So all of you should have received an email like that earlier today, unless you registered late, as we did hear that some did. But you should have received an email like that earlier today. If you don't see that in your inbox, I would suggest that you check your spam folder. Kim, there is a question about the Vpol results. So I'm wondering if you could put that back up. This question comes in from Scott. On Vpol results, what's the difference between number of votes cast and number of votes to be elected? So let's, thank you, Scott. That's a great question. Let's just look in the clergy column. Tonight we had 16 clergy that voted in this ballot. According to our canons, in order to be elected to a position, a candidate must receive the majority of the votes cast in each of the clergy and lay orders. So again, tonight we had 16 votes cast by clergy. So in order to be elected, the number of votes required was 9. On the lay side, we had 57 lay votes cast. In order to have a majority, that would require the 29 votes. I hope that makes that clear. Let's see. Question from Marcia. What is the candidate number? I'm not exactly sure what you're asking there, Marcia. Perhaps you could type a little more into the Q&A for me.
Andrew, I think that she's referring to the column on the Vpol that has a number for the candidate, which we didn't use tonight. It wasn't populated, but in the elections at convention, we may use that column to identify the different candidates for office by number, so that if different nominees are added or if different nominees are removed from the voting on subsequent ballots, it's easier to identify them by number than having to always use the name.
Great, thank you, John. And that's exactly what Marcia was asking. Thank you, Marcia, for that question. I do want to leave the Q&A open for just another few moments if there are any other questions about voting by Vpol. Any final questions? Seeing none, before we bring this session to a close, I do want to walk through some last details. First, please make sure you register for convention if you haven't already. All of you registered to participate tonight, but we need you to register for convention as well. The link for registering for convention was in the same email you used to register for tonight. Then, as I mentioned earlier, if you know that an alternate will be taking the place of a delegate, please complete the seating of an alternate form, which can be found on the convention page of the Diocesan website. This is also very, very important. Because this online format for convention is new to all of us, we want all clergy and lay delegates, including alternates who will replace delegates, registered by this coming Saturday. Trying to get people registered on the day of convention will be challenging, so please, 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 please don't wait until then. Please register now. Those who are registered will receive 3 emails from us next week. The first will have the convention booklet and a summary of what to expect in terms of the emails and what to do with each email you receive. You should receive that first email from us on Monday. Then the second email will have the link for the convention webinar, and the third will have the link to access Vpol for convention. So there will be separate emails for your links to the webinar and your link to Vpol. If you do not receive those emails by next Friday, January 29th, which is the day before convention, it means we don't have you registered. So please register. On the day of convention, it is very important to get on the webinar early. We will open the webinar at 7:30 a.m. and we ask that you join no later than 8:30. This doesn't mean you need to sit at your computer from 7:30 until 9 when convention begins. But the sooner you log on, the sooner you can get some coffee, walk your dog, eat breakfast, or say your morning prayers. And more importantly, having you log on early will do 2 things for all of us. First, it will tell you if you're having any challenges getting logged on, so we can then get you the help you need. And second, it will enable us to start counting those who are registered and logged on for our quorum count. So please log into the webinar early on convention day. And when you do that, please log into Vpol at the same time. That will save us all a lot of work and time later on when we get to the elections on the agenda of convention. Finally, let me just say, it is our hope that convention will be uplifting and inspiring for all of you. We want everyone to have the best possible experience they can, and we are working very hard to make that happen. With that in mind, on the day of convention, we will have helplines available to support you. Of course, if your Wi-Fi goes out at home, there's nothing that we can do about that. But if you have other questions, this line will be available to you. We will leave it up on the screen for a few minutes here so that you can write it down if you want. But this helpline number will also be available in the convention booklet. That convention booklet is being finalized now, and as I said previously, you should receive a link to the booklet on Monday. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that we will have a prayer line available for both English and Spanish speakers. So that's it for tonight. We are coming to the end of our time. We're so grateful to all of you for joining us. If you have any more questions about convention, please feel free to email any of our diocesan staff. And most of all, be sure to read your upcoming convention emails. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you again for joining us.